broken glass from that guy that walked by, and it's so hard not to use another word for that guy. I'll tell you. I grew up in this city, and I hate to see this. I hate to see this. I hate to see some of the things that I've seen on video this last few weeks. It is troubling where we find ourselves in 2020. Downtown Seattle, up there on your right, the right side of your screen, a small group of demonstrators there confronting Seattle police. A skirmish line in Seattle looks very much like a skirmish line in LA. Same tactics, same sorts of equipment being used, and facing off against people who are outraged, in most of whom are outraged, some of whom are bent on causing trouble. And this is LA. This is, tell me where this is. We're trying to find it. That was one of those bird scooters he just threw through a window. It's a Starbucks. That's what made me think it was Seattle. And it looks like it's getting, are people looting it, or what are they doing? They're just destroying the windows. Are they going in there stealing stuff? We don't know. This is on Spring Street. It's 1st and Spring. So this is a ground view from 6th and Spring. 6th and Spring. So this is about 4 blocks south of where Air 7 was a few moments ago. This is a ground view. I believe this is the CNN crew watching this Starbucks getting busted open and people going inside. They're stealing bottles of water. They're going in. They're coming out with bottles of water, with sandwiches, and their pictures are on TV, or at least, available to be viewed. Yeah, that's a question our director, Gabe, is asking. What are they going to take from in there that's of any value? Are you going to grab bags of coffee? Are they going to grab, this guy grabbed a bottle of water? Yeah, you, right there, this guy.
That's not the way it works. Yes, I can hear you. And
okay, let's listen in. Okay, this is a CNN reporter, so forgive me if...
I'll chat with you in 1 second, sir. What you were looking at, the live pictures you were looking at, this is a Starbucks in downtown Los Angeles. And what we've been seeing as this crowd has been going through, different parts of Los Angeles, is that they are breaking through some of the windows. We saw them break through the Starbucks. People run in, grab items from Starbucks, and run out. What the Los Angeles Police Department, I'm going to chat with you in 1 second. I'll chat with you in 1 second. What the police here in Los Angeles have declared this type of gathering to be an unlawful assembly. What that is they are now staging to essentially try to disperse the crowd and to say if they stay, there will be arrests made. So what we've been seeing throughout the evening is the Los Angeles police trying to go in and disperse the crowds. But as the hours are going by, things are getting a bit more heated as some of these protesters are turning on the businesses here in downtown Los Angeles. One thing I want to point out is that there is a diverse crowd here, and different sections of this protest is broken up into smaller groups, and each smaller group seems to have a bit of a personality. Some are more confrontational with police, others chant in unison, others seem to just want to cause some violence. So, it's right now I don't see any police officers, but we have seen police officers move in after you can see some guy in there just rummaging through the Starbucks.
There's another guy busting open the door there. Air 7, you're seeing two views of it, from the ground and from the air. Both live, both real-time views here of 6th and Spring Streets in downtown LA. A Starbucks being trashed and looted. Some of these folks wearing masks, some of these folks not, and some of them being caught in obvious acts of vandalism and larceny.
gathered here, there are people who feel
And
very passionately.
if the
They're very
past
upset.
is prologue,
And then
some
there
of
are
them will
some
end up
who
being
look like they're
prosecuted
joining
based
in
on the
crowd.
images that you're seeing here. Because in 1992, one thing that occurred after months later was that police were going through video that had been recorded of the situation on April 29th and the riot that lasted 5 days, and people going into stores and looting. They were getting pictures of their faces and they were trying their best to identify them, and they would bring them in. And a lot of people got arrested and jailed based on images from the riots. So this may happen in this case. This guy in particular, who was involved in breaking a window, running inside, and grabbing stuff. And you can hear the sirens now in the distance. It looks like the LAPD is showing up. They're coming. This is 6th and Spring Street, a Starbucks coffee shop that has just been, the windows have been smashed and the store has been looted. And you're seeing folks arriving right now. I don't know, these look like private security people. These look like a private security agency that has shown up, and they're setting their bicycles up as kind of a barrier, and they're trying to keep people out of the Starbucks. So they have gotten there. I did hear sirens during that, from that CNN crew on the ground. It sounded like police were arriving on the scene, but I don't see them yet. And the crowd, meanwhile, has moved on. They have moved on, I believe, in a southerly direction down Spring Street. All right. All right, Chris Christie in Air 7 HD. Chris, what can you tell us?
Hey there, Mark. Just coming up on the intersection of Broadway and First Street. Call went out just about maybe a minute and a half ago. An LAPD officer calling for help, and instantly you could see a number of skirmish lines forming at the intersection with I would say, a moderate crowd across the street here. So there was a confrontation. Things got heated. An officer was surrounded. He called for help, and in a matter of seconds, help has arrived, and there are now dozens of law enforcement officers at this intersection. Just a microcosm of what we've been seeing in the sense that there are so many LAPD officers, all over downtown. And I'm going to reiterate something that I said earlier in the evening. As far as the eye could see from up here in Air 7 HD, still, the 10 freeway off my nose, looking out the right, the 101 freeway, every direction I look, every freeway has lines of LAPD officers with their sirens on, rushing to the downtown area. It looks just the same as it did when we went to get fuel a short time ago, and they're still arriving in huge numbers. The entire department is on citywide tactical alert. They're staying past their shifts. They're calling in officers who are off duty on their days off, some on vacation, and they are arriving in huge numbers to get this situation under control. Obviously, the situation has evolved throughout the night. It certainly appears that what started as a large group has kind of splintered off into a number of smaller groups. They're scattered across the city. We're not too far from LAPD headquarters. You're looking at that Starbucks just a moment ago over on Spring Street. We saw the 110 freeway shut down earlier this evening. They've covered a lot of ground. They've zigzagged their way through downtown. Some peaceful, but the peaceful ones are few and far between now, as they really seem to be looking for trouble and causing commotion, especially when they get in the face of law enforcement. Really, I don't know. It's just at a certain point, it's one thing to get the point across, but they are antagonizing these officers until there's no choice but to, this physical contact. It takes one miscalculation. Somebody pushes, somebody shoves. You see the pushing and shoving across town. Officers using great restraint, but this is what we're looking at.
Got folks down in the intersection there. And you saw that Starbucks there at 6th and Spring that was looted. Skirmish line forming there, so they will form. And you're at Broadway and what again?
This is Broadway and First, and now we understand that 2 officers are down. 2 officers are down a few blocks from here at Spring and 2nd Street, so that's not too far from our location. Bear with us as we swing the camera over and move over towards 2nd Street. Up and to the, up and to the left, and we should have something behind this building here. We'll see what the commotion is all about, but a call just went out for 2 officers down. So let's take a look here behind this building, and we'll see what we see with you. As we come around this corner here, I saw some patrol cars on the other side, but this obviously is the area where the subway tunnel is being constructed. Here comes a group of officers, a strike team traveling on 2nd Street. This is Broadway, so we need to go up one more to Spring, which is going to be one to the top. Yeah, right up there. That intersection doesn't look, that looks clear. So we'll look around here, Mark, but certainly the calls are coming out fast and furious, so we'll keep an eye out.
All right. And,
oh, here we go. We've got some ambulances.
Ambulance there.
Got one ambulance with a number of patrol cars and escort here. Is he picking somebody up, or is he already, I'm wondering, it looks like LA City Fire Light Force on the way to a call, and that might very well be what we're looking at here.
Okay, and he's going up, having to go up on the curb. There's a Tesla sitting there in the middle of the road, kind of cockeyed, and I guess there's
odd, yeah.
Or a Mercedes.
Yeah, Mercedes,
just nobody, apparently nobody behind the wheel is just sitting there. All right, well, we'll try to make sense of this. Again, a report of 2 officers who may be injured. That would bring to 4 the number of officers that have been reported injured this evening so far in downtown LA. Things have definitely taken a turn since the sun went down and as the night has worn on. The people who were involved in the peaceful protest that began this afternoon at about 5:30, it appears most of them have gone, and what's left are people, a lot of people, I should say, I guess, that are bent on causing problems.
Bring it back to second and Spring.
All right. So he's,
looks
as
like
Chris
LAPD,
Christie.
something we've got. LAPD's looking at something right here, right out my left window, Rob. Looks like they've got their searchlight on, a skirmish line in an alleyway, and some pedestrians running here. I wonder what they're running from. Maybe if you tilt up, I wonder if what's he looking for there? It's very interesting.
That parking lot is clearing out.
Does she know we're on the air? Okay. Let's swing it over to 2nd and Spring again. Here comes that ambulance who made the turn.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like, that LAPD, okay, it looks like they've come to a stop there. Firefighters getting out of the vehicle. And there is another group of officers. We'll see what we see here. I just am trying to look around these buildings. Always tricky here in downtown LA, Mark, as you know. But it does look like LA City Fire has reached the destination of their call. They don't seem to be moving very frantically. It looks like maybe an officer's sitting down on the, no, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of this, but this is the vicinity of where that call came from. Maybe that officer right there approaching the ambulance. Maybe he got shoved around. Not sure. Not sure the nature of the injury, but the call was out that 2 officers needed help. And so this is help arriving at the intersection of Spring and 2nd.
Okay, well, we're hoping, based on the body language of everybody involved, that the officers aren't badly injured. Appears not. We'll try to get an update if we can. That brings to 4 kind of our unofficial count of the number of LA police officers who have been injured this evening. No official count of any civilians who've been hurt. No official count of the number of arrests that have been made. And no word on when this thing will end up being over. This could be a very, very long night in the city of Los Angeles. The view on the right, 3rd and Spring. It's about 2 blocks away from, about 3 blocks away from where that, 2 blocks away from where the Starbucks was looted. And what we're seeing, yeah, that's a guy running around with a fire extinguisher. He just dropped it on the ground.
Look at that alleyway where that light is. They're trying to get a crowd under control in that alleyway, it sounds like. So a group of officers, I'm not sure, Mark, can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it looks like a group of officers in an alleyway just north of 3rd Street. Apparently they're trying to prevent the crowd from getting past 3rd Street. So they're starting to use these skirmish lines to kind of draw lines and really limit the movement of some of these protesters. What was earlier large groups has really splintered off into smaller groups of individuals, some on scooters, some on skateboards, some riding bicycles, but the ones that they can kind of corral and box in, those are the ones that they're focusing on. They kind of focus on boxing in groups because, remember, they have already declared an unlawful assembly. So once they do that, if the crowd is not dispersing, if folks are still acting up, then those people are the ones that are going to start getting arrested when they're in a position to do it. The only way they can get into that position is by boxing groups and using those skirmish lines to form impromptu perimeters. And then, as we've seen in the past, they'll start going one by one with the hand ties and handcuffs and begin taking the worst offenders into custody. Mm-hmm. The big tip-off there is when you see those skirmish lines moving, and that's what you see right here. Here's a skirmish line with officers marching down the street. They mean business, and those protesters are going to either have to give up peacefully and stay in place or run in the opposite direction. Some of them, as you see, are just bent on antagonizing the police. They get eyeball to eyeball with these officers. They scream, they yell, they take their cell phones out, and they try and provoke law enforcement. And so law enforcement, obviously, these LA's finest, obviously trained, as you mentioned, Mark, to bring the temperature down and deal with these situations as tough as it may be. But it looks like a pretty large cluster here that they've been able to kind of corral at the intersection of, I think that's going to be Spring and 3rd Street. So they're marching down Spring Street. You see some protesters with their hands in the air, kind of testing these officers, not really budging. It looks like they've come to a little pause there, and they're just basically trying to approach the intersection, get everybody in that intersection, and form almost like a square with a skirmish line on all four sides of the intersection.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, we see the movement, and we see people backing up, and LA police moving forward, pushing the crowd. And again, it does seem to be much smaller crowd, a much less dense crowd than was out earlier in the evening demonstrating. And what we're seeing now, what are we seeing on the right? What's news? Spring and 4th, a bunch of people. I'm not sure what that building is that people are running into and out of, and whether that's being actively looted right now. It doesn't appear to be, because there's a skirmish line right there. So you're looking here.
So this is...
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Christina, this is Spring and 4th.
You're at Spring and 4th, right. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mark. I was just talking to our assignment desk simultaneously. So, yeah, we're just continuing to watch this group of officers. As you see, just in the last minute, they've moved that entire crowd. Very interesting tactic here that we see often. They've moved about 100 people a full city block just in the last 2 minutes, just by utilizing that skirmish line, arm in arm, steadily marching forward, and you see the crowd basically forced to back up, give up, go in a different direction. It's a little bit of a game of cat and mouse, but when you finally get to the intersection, they're just basically surrounded by additional LAPD officers that are ready. Now, you just hope there's no confrontation like we've seen, though, and unfortunately we've seen too many confrontations tonight, some involving physical shoving and pushing and other fireworks and things being thrown at officers. And then you've seen occasionally situations where LAPD even has to retreat, and that looks like what we're looking at here. It looks like there's been something thrown, and that is, I'm hearing that from our assignment, that something has been thrown, and you can see a little smoke, and now the crowd running in an opposite direction. Not sure if they're running from tear gas or if they're running from something else that has been launched into the crowd. That is all part of the fog of chaos here. Just unclear sometimes where the things are being launched from. We saw fireworks earlier. We've seen canisters, tear gas canisters being launched by law enforcement, and then we've seen bottles being thrown by other protesters. So a little hard to make out who's tossing what sometimes, especially as you peer around these tall buildings. But they seem to be making steady progress, pushing the crowd south on Spring Street.
All right, and what we're looking at here, it appears, are two views of the same event from a couple of slightly different angles, both at Spring and 4th Street, essentially. And you're watching this skirmish line that's really getting what appears to be the largest group of protesters now that's on Spring Street. That's where a lot of the chaos has happened. That's where we saw the Starbucks being damaged. We saw the windows being smashed and the Starbucks restaurant, Starbucks coffee shop being looted.
Now
as you see, you got more. You got some physical. You got somebody's going to get arrested. Somebody's going to get hurt here if they're not careful.
Yep. Several protesters, different pockets of them, pushing back on those law enforcement officers, shoving, pushing, and that's enough to get you arrested, as you mentioned, obviously. But again, we don't see many people being taken into custody. We've seen a couple of isolated detainments earlier, but really the goal seems to be not to arrest people, but to push this crowd further down the block and I guess just box them in. That seems to be the tactic. They're moving, despite all that pushing and shoving, they're continuing to march forward down Spring Street, around these parked cars, right down the block here, and I wonder what's waiting for them at the next intersection. My guess is a whole nother set of officers arm in arm, and we'll see if they start making arrests at some point. That, again, this is an unlawful assembly at this point, and they have the right to take these people into custody if they can manage to do that.
Well,
but the crowd is very rowdy.
They don't want to, I can tell you that, because A, it's too much paperwork. B, the jails, they don't want more people in the jails, because remember, we've got this pandemic. Kind of the overlay over all of this is coronavirus is still very much a factor in the decision making of both public agencies and private companies as well. They don't want to put people in jails and then have to worry about them dealing with the coronavirus or getting ill. So that may be part of the consideration here. But
Mark, I've spoken to several LAPD officers. Yeah, he's really pushing. He's out of control. One of his buddies threw a cone directly at a police officer, and he is putting up a real struggle. He's going to be taken in. The problem is, I have spoken to several LAPD officers in the past couple of weeks, especially as folks have started to venture out, and there's been a little bit of an uptick in various crimes. The number of arrests are not corresponding with the crime, because in all too many cases, they can't keep them in jail. They are basically, even if they're being detained and taken in, it's a matter of minutes or a couple of hours before they're simply caught and released. They get processed, they get their fingerprints taken, and they basically are told to go home and stay home. There's almost, unless you're talking about a major felony, there are the very few arrests taking place right now due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I wonder if the people in the crowd know that. I wonder if they can either sense that or get a feeling for that. And if that's fueling any of this activity.
I think in some neighborhoods they absolutely have taken note of that, because, again, they go back and a lot of them are repeat offenders. And that's not to call anybody in this group career criminal by any means, but certainly what started as a peaceful protest has devolved into something much different throughout the evening. And these people, and obviously we understand there's a lot of frustration. People are unemployed. They are desperate for, they're frustrated. They are going through all of the things that we're all going through in life. And this is their outlet on this particular occasion, where they are, in some cases, basically using the George Floyd killing to basically cause trouble. So something has been launched into the crowd there. They run, and they're basically onto the next intersection, where I can guarantee you they will end up calling for more law enforcement to surround the next block. Here's another scuffle at the intersection now of Spring Street and 5th Street, but that must have been about 50 people who went running the other way on Spring Street, and you hope that they don't just try and break into the next Starbucks or cause more havoc.
This is a dude that lost his shoe, Someone's being restrained by people in the crowd. People in the crowd are trying to basically police themselves, saying, don't antagonize the police. And yeah, I just watched something unfold there where you could see somebody lost a shoe. Somebody picked it up and tried to get it to him, but he was too close to the police. And there was a whole thing that happened there.
The question at a certain point, I mean, and obviously we have the luxury of discussing this and asking this question in an abstract way. You know, the question is why? Why at this point of the night would you do this? You've made your point. You've expressed frustrations. We're all upset about what happened in Minneapolis. But at a certain point, the sun goes down and things tend to go sideways for no apparent reason sometimes. And it's just unfortunate. It's the nature of these type of mob situations. This is, I think, I wouldn't go so far to call this a riot. This is a very animated protest with a lot of menacing behaviors. I mean, there's some looting. We've obviously seen that Starbucks a short time ago. Look at this. Here's a woman who obviously did something to get the attention of these officers, and they are tackling her at the corner of Spring and 5th. So this woman came out. I'm not sure what they saw her doing or what she did to provoke that. She did put her hand in the air, and then you saw that group of officers take her down. The rest of them continue on. I wonder what she did in that case.
Wow. Well, it'll be adjudicated if she ends up being charged. She's clearly being detained. We don't know if she's been arrested. Sometimes people get hooked up and put in handcuffs and then later not even taken into the station, just, released, because they decide the decision's made at the field level to just not go ahead and arrest that person, just to detain them for a while. So we don't know.
Let's go ahead and do an orbit around that intersection. Let's see what the other side looks like. It looks like maybe a standoff developing at this next intersection. Okay, that's okay. We're now looking between 5th and 6th Street. So a bulk of that crowd now essentially loitering and testing the patience of these officers. I mean, like you said, if they have the feeling or already know that they're not going to have to pay any consequences for their behavior, and the chances of even getting arrested are relatively low, the next question becomes, well, how does this end? Right. I mean, how does this end when you have a group of, I think, at least from what I could tell, maybe the crowd started at a couple hundred or maybe a little more. I think at least in this particular intersection and behind them, there can't be more than 75 to 100 at the very most. But how do you get control of 75 or 100 people and tell them to go home unless you're going to take all of them, to jail, which we know that's not going to happen.
Right. That guy at the center of your screen, if you tilt up just a little bit, the guy that's been in that white jersey, that guy we saw run into the Starbucks, grab a sandwich and a bottle of water, and basically loot the place, involved in looting the place. Now he is sitting down in the center of the street. But this, he's just was involved in that. That's well documented. We got it from the ground level, and now we're getting him from Air 7. Who this guy was one of several people involved in kind of looting that Starbucks store down at 6th and Spring. And to the right of your screen is another ground level shot. And that is basically right next to the Starbucks at 6th and Spring at that same intersection where people are still gathered and where damage is still being done. And
I'm sorry. Oh, look at that. A much larger crowd further up Spring Street, and I don't see many officers around them. So that larger crowd that we saw maybe 5 minutes ago that went running up Spring Street is now gathered between 6th and 7th Street, I think is what we're looking at here.